So welcome guys to our first webinar for the second week. We've got Charles Instone, the Director of E-commerce for the drugstore, which is a science-backed natural remedies and health products business. And today we're talking about how to build brand advocates through brand loyalty. So we'll be going through a few slides to begin with, and then any questions, any comments, just make sure you put them into the chat section. So if you've been here before, a lot of these sessions are really interactive. So we'll take questions throughout and at the very end. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this one, but I'll pass it over to Charles.
Awesome. Well, good to meet everyone. Good to see you all taking your lunch break to listen to me. A bold move by all of you. I'll just quickly share my screen and then we can crack into some of the slides I've made, and then like we said, just leave any chat or questions that you have during it, and we'll engage with those throughout, and also at the end try and make this as interactive as possible. So yeah, so I mean, something that we've sort of built a lot of our brand off at the drugstore is brand advocacy, especially when you try and reduce marketing costs, or a lot of startups, for example, will try and bootstrap. How do you drive customers to not only come to you, but spread the word of your messaging and your purpose to other people and get them to shop with you? Or, you know, how do you get them to share content? I think this is the broad idea of what brand advocacy is, and a lot of people can see it as a transactional thing. You know, how can you get people to share your brand to other people so that they buy from you? But brand advocacy is a lot about not just the customer, but the followers, subscribers, and how they engage and you know, subscribe, retweet, like, and share your content. Basically, an advocate can be anyone, anywhere, and they basically are those people that will engage with your different channels, whether that's your website, whether that's your blog, whether that's your social media channels. A good caveat for this whole presentation to consider is that without a good product, you're not going to get advocates, regardless of what you do here. So this is all founded on a great product, or a great, you know, we're a retailer, so we found ours on great selection of great products. But you need something that customer wants, and something that they'll come back to, or something that they will then share. I respect that a lot of people might have things like, you know, if you're a bike brand, you might not have a product that has a high returning customer rate, because once you own a bike, you have a bike for a large amount of time. But then, you know, how do you create a brand that then is shared widely across a group of people? So I'm mindful of that as well, as that it's not just for FMCG goods or consumables. You know, it is for all goods. Advocates can come in all shapes and sizes and represent loads of different brands. So I've tried to be mindful of that in this presentation as well. So an advocate, like I said, can be anyone and anywhere. An advocate is someone that looks at your brand, looks at your product, and looks at your purpose, and they align themselves with all of them. And they really want to push that. They say to their friends, it's not just about an e-commerce interaction and returning customer rate, which I think sometimes advocates can be misaligned with. It's not just your top spenders and you know, top customers. It can be anyone that shares your message. I mean, I'll come to a couple of examples later, but there's one particular brand that launched, and I was pretty much a brand advocate, and I never even tried their product yet. I am about to try their product, but for the first few months I haven't. So advocacy is typically viewed as like a subset of those customers who rave about your product, but it's not simply just that. Advocacy is a sliding scale. So it's typically viewed as a pyramid, but actually my personal view of it is that it's fluid. It's more of a timeline from someone unlikely to share to someone that's very likely to share your content and product messaging. Consumers tend to be segmented into these small groups on the email list, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're targeting advocates effectively. Like I said, you can get top spenders that you might think are advocates, but they don't actually want the constant sharing of your messaging. They don't want, you know, your purpose in their inbox all the time. But I'll come to a few examples of brands that really do share their purpose quite well, and ones that you know, have this huge following, huge amount of shareability in their content, that their advocates do then share, and you can get some amazing organic growth like that we've seen at the drugstore. So this is what I'm saying. You know, this is the typical pyramid you normally see from observer to advocate. I think it's very easy to look at them as segments and to market to each of these segments differently, which is great. But I tend to look at it more like this. And you can lie anywhere on this scale, right? And it's fluid. People will go from unlikely to buy to likely to buy, and the aim of this is really to get people to be on the right hand side of that. It's basically the chance of sharing your message, and an advocate is simply someone that lies on that right hand side, and we want to give the consumer as much chance to be on that right hand side as possible, and we do that through loads of different things, from your product, your brand, your messaging, and how shareable your content is. So these are what I consider as the top 3 ways outside of the product itself that you can actually develop new advocates, that you can get these people that maybe might become an advocate, you know, sitting in the middle of that scale, to become advocates and to speak for your brand, to tell their friends. You know, bloggers can be advocates as well as you know, journalists. Journalists can be PRs, and journalists can be PRs. Journalists can be advocates, and we certainly at the drugstore have found that. You know, we've had some PR opportunities that we've gone with, and we've given them the full brand experience rather than just sending them some products to their office. You know, sign up to newsletter, the order confirmation flow, everything, and they're consistently writing about us now, featuring us in gift guides, and it's really paid off. So it's important to know that some people will never become advocates, and don't obsess over these people who sort of just want a transactional relationship. I mean, if you obsess over these people and trying to convert them into advocates, you're actually probably more likely to lose them as a customer by annoying them, or they might unsubscribe and you lose a touch point. So segmentation of that group is really important. You know, looking at who opens your email list, you know, who engages with your brand on social media, and pay real attention to that. So the first case I want to cover is actually your brand. I think it's the first thing that consumers come across, and your content and your tone of voice needs to be impactful. You know, if we think about like the Instagram generation now, we look at, you know, profiles and how do you make your profile stand out, or how do you make your content stand out, and large part of that comes down through the positioning of the brand itself. So this is actually the brand I was speaking about that I was an advocate of before I even tried their product. You know, it's just paint. It's not, you know, it's nothing special, but it's a great brand. They have a really clear cause, and they, you know, their customer service is incredible. That you can have consultations with some great interior designers as well to help, you know, see which color or what suit is best for your house. And cause marketing's on the rise. You know, 62% of under 40s say they'll spend more on a brand with a clear and positive purpose than one without. And 70% of millennials prefer brands that have social media and are engaged with them, comments, replies, good tone of voice, relatable, funny. And I think it's important to get that across very early on in your brand. And the things that you're going to engage with as a consumer very early on are social media and your website. So the homepage of your website and your social media needs to be a brand-led channel. You know, it gets your purpose across very, very early, and it gets your tone of voice across, and you engage with those customers. You know, in the comment section, how many times I've gone on a brand's page, in the comment section there's no replies to the customers, and I think that's just such an easy win to get, and starts coaching these people into being advocates. Not necessarily going to drive them to be an advocate straight away, but these little cues and engagements with these customers drives them into being a long-term advocate. So these are a couple of things that you can look at in your brand development to increase brand advocacy further down the line. Tone of voice is really, really simple and a really easy one to nail. It's basically how you're developing a rapport with the customer. You know, be relatable, know your audience. I mean, what works for the drugstore might not necessarily work for Lick. It might not necessarily work for Nike, you know, but you know your customer, know how to relate to them, and speak to them in that way. A good example is, you know, a playful tone of voice would be innocent, whereas a more serious and knowledgeable tone of voice would be someone like Rafa, the cycling brand. As well as content, the next big brand dev pillar. I think if you're not creating shareable or purposeful content, then you really need to question why it's there. Filler content can be extremely dangerous in terms of losing interaction with your customers. So you don't need to post as regularly as, you know, once a day or whatever, but making sure that each piece of content, including blogs, including emails and newsletters, there's a clear driven purpose behind it, and it's your purpose. It's not necessarily sales related. I find that when you do this, the customer over time, and you know, you're always relating back to your purpose, as long as it aligns with the customer purpose as well, then you are going to get advocates further down the line because they stand for what you stand for. The brand itself is obviously a big one. The look and feel, is it instantly engaging? I think that's really simple. I think in this, I mean, especially the younger demographics, they're very, very brand led, and increasingly so as well. So it's a tough one because, I mean, for me, it doesn't, you know, brand is incredible and it can do so much, but it just engages people so quickly. I mean, I was won over by Lick before I even knew what their purpose was really. I wouldn't say I was an advocate yet. Now I know their purpose, then I am, but it is something that just catches the consumer and hooks them in. And then when they read a little bit more, they understand the purpose. And it's just getting them on that pathway to advocacy. And then, yeah, next one's purpose. And then if you give back or you're charitable in any way, it's great to put that front and center. You know, align your purpose, align your charitable side of your business with what the customer believes in. And you should, I mean, most brands know who their audience is, but it's really speaking to them and looking a way that they would expect. Here's a couple of great examples. We've got like Nasty Girl, Boohoo, Pretty Little Thing, know their audiences really, really well. Rafa, there's some of the smaller ones over here. This is called Home Things, a new sustainable cleaning solution. Net-a-Porter, which acts more like an editorial piece. Form Nutrition, which has really, really clear values, and Manor Golf, who are trying to invert the way that golf attire is as an industry, and trying to make it more streetwear. And they all abide by these pillars. You know, they all nail each one. They know their audience really, really well, and they know how to engage that audience. Most of the early adopters in any of these brands will now be advocates for them as well. The big one, I think, is comms in terms of how you're actually going to talk to your demographic. And again, this is just, I mean, a lot about brand advocacy is just knowing who your ideal customer is and how can you get them to stand for as like an ambassador or an advocate for your brand. Just know where they go, what they do, what they eat, where they shop, what they read, and comms is such a big part of that. And I think the guys that are doing this really, really well, Huel, they know their audience inside out, and their messaging is amazingly clear. They've developed huge relationships with magazines like Women's Health, Men's Health. Obviously, it takes a while for the magazines, but you can start with bloggers. You can start with influencers in that space and really dominate that circle. You'll notice if you go into Instagram, you know, a lot of bloggers in a niche will follow other bloggers within that niche, and the consumers are likely to follow one or two, maybe more, of those influencers as well. So when they're following all of those, and you can put a nice influencer program together, and you're controlling that space, you know, say I launch a product and I get 20 influencers that all follow each other, that are likely to have the same following, to post about my brand over the course of 2 weeks, then you're controlling that narrative. And these are the people, you know, consumers trust their voice. Consumers trust Women's Health, Men's Health. Consumers trust Alice Living or Grace Beverley as influencers. And it's just developing those close relationships with them and getting a channel in which that you can share your message. So it's a lot about where you're sharing your message, you know, the blogs, the influencers, the events. You know, if you're a health and wellness brand like us, going to health and wellness events is a massive deal. You know, you might go to Balance, for example, which is a massive health and wellbeing event, and getting into these places and being able to talk to people face to face and conveying your purpose as a brand does develop advocacy very, very early on. These are the people that, you know, you need as a baseline of your customer group. I'll come to an example later as a referral program that generates 12% of their sales from referrals. And it's just incredible that you can influence someone's behavior so easily by just paying attention to who they are, what they do, how they speak, and being relatable to them. So this is a lot about being the source of conversation as well. You know, infographics, memes, newsletters, whatever suits your brand. It's not just about pushing product, it's pushing your purpose. Form Nutrition in the health and wellness space is someone that do this very, very well. Rafa in the cycling space, Goop in the lifestyle wellbeing space. You know, pushing their purpose. They're not overly sales orientated. You know, why should a customer interact with you? Why should a customer buy stuff with you? That is at the drugstore. Whenever we send out comms, the purpose, as in the why are we sending this out? What do we want the consumer to get from this? Not what we can get from the consumer. You have to sort of flip that round. You know, when you have a blog that can be shared by a customer, you know, and you double your reach, that is more impactful than the uplift in sales you might get from a sale email, you know, 20% off or whatever. That's very short-term, you know, sales. That short-term sales boost does not outweigh the long-term impact of introducing, you know, a couple of more hundred customers to your brand. So we really value the why and the purpose, why someone would interact with you. And I think that's a lot of the reason why we've seen the growth we have from very early days. I mean, we're a year and a half old, and we're seeing growth numbers that are putting us in, you know, quite high valuations now. So this is, I mean, customer journey, I think, is basically the most cost-effective and highest impact way of not just getting the return customers, but also getting advocates on board. If you think about it, the customers now decided to buy from you. They're getting the product. So how can you make your experience as sticky as possible and as pleasurable as possible to get the customer to come back to you? Some brand doing this really great is Upcircle Beauty. I really recommend to take a look at them. The way that they're so purpose driven in all their comms is incredible. They, you know, from the actual sign up to the unboxing of the product is really makes you feel like you're part of something a little bit bigger. than just a brand or just a purchase decision online, which it can be so transactional when it's an e-com purchase. So this is another example. My girlfriend bought this deodorant. It's natural deodorant online, and you can see on the right this personalized experience. You know, whether you make them laugh, smile, or understanding your cause, whatever suits your brand, you're basically relaying that straight from the off. You know, this is an order confirmation email, which actually further down it says, you know, this is what you ordered, blah, blah, blah. But it was another day at the office when Kelsey jumped out her chair so fast that I thought fire had engulfed her hair. You know, this sort of copy, the brand is obviously quite a playful brand, but the moment she got that email, you know, it automatically puts you into a headspace where you feel positive towards that brand. It's not about, you know, an instant win, about, you know, converting someone to be an advocate. It's small little steps that you can take throughout the customer journey to make someone feel more attached to your brand, and also to understand your brand a lot more. And every single comms that Native sends out is always purpose driven. I mean, they will have sales emails, they will have other stuff, but there's always purpose behind it, and it's always personalized to you as well, which is fantastic. I really recommend checking those guys out. And then packaging. You know, you've bought the product, and now you're receiving the product. How can you make an impact that is different to, you know, just receiving an Amazon parcel? You know, this brand Face, they have insets that clearly dictate what their purpose is. They're quite fun, and there's a lot of personality in that, and really drawing the brand personality and allowing it to unfold within the unboxing experience. You know, it's such an easy win to make someone that's already bought your product develop a bigger affinity to your brand just by including a few things like this. Maybe you also include things like stickers, which is quite commonly done. You might have voucher codes for friends, or the one that we rate quite highly is actually making customer service call to actions very clear. So you might have, for example, if you have any problems, reach out to us at hello@thedrug.store. You know, if anyone has any problems and you're hiding the customer service, and so many people do this as well, but you're hiding the customer service details or making it difficult to get in contact with customer service, then you're not going to have a good brand experience. Whereas, and I'll come on to this now actually, how to mold advocate behaviors, a lot of it is actually being upfront, being transparent, and allowing people to have as much interaction with your brand as possible. It can be quite intensive on the customer service view, but it's really worth it. You know, the reviews that we've got through people having bad experiences and converting them into good ones, you know, those people are, they're the, if you can win those over, then you have got an advocate. And I'll show you a couple of reviews that we had this year from those type of customers. But customer service and being upfront about how you can get in contact really quickly and increasing the response time of that, and also preempting what the customer wants, you know, whether a voucher code, as well as solving the issue, will make them have a much better experience. Being preemptive on it and not waiting for the customer to request what they want is, you know, we've seen go a long way in terms of their positive feelings towards our brand. So this is obviously, you know, one way that you can mold behavior. Is probably the oldest method, which is referral programs or loyalty programs. 12% of Pure Vida's sales came from customer referrals. It can be extremely effective. I personally think that referral programs are great, but it's not necessarily advocates that are using them. You know, if you're driven by price, you're not necessarily an advocate. There will be advocates using them, of course, but it's not necessarily purely advocates that use referral programs. It might be someone that is transactional in behavior, that just wants money off the next time, which is fine. But we really want to entice the sharing of content as well on social media. And that brings us to the content. You know, this is an example of one picture that I picked off our Instagram. You know, it's been sent to 185 different people. It's not necessarily a product. It's not necessarily your purpose. It's something that people share that aligns with them. So this picture clearly aligned with our audience, and it was shared 335 saves. And as a small growing brand, that had a massive difference on the people that are aware to us. And it also then fills into your, you know, Instagram and Facebook retargeting as well, when people interact with your brand like this. So this is more the personalization of comms. So we've done this a couple of times to our advocates, which is sending from the founder, co-founder, or a particular person within the team. Maybe it's even a customer service person that they've come in contact with, and helping them navigate a sale or, you know, a new product launch. But it's helping them feel like they're in the know. They understand that you value them. They are the first people to know about things, and they're getting as much from your brand as possible. They want to feel special, and you should treat them like they are special. And I think when you get emails like this from co-founders, that, I mean, obviously this isn't personalized towards me, but instead of it coming from Love Wellness, the brand behind this, it's coming from Lo Bosworth, who's the founder. And I think when you get emails like that, as a consumer, you feel like it's not just an out-of-the-box method. You're not just in the email flow. You have been selected to be within this small subset of people that are getting special advice, or, you know, special launches or whatever. I mean, one of the biggest issues, I think, in terms of brand advocates is actually understanding how to measure it, because there's no real tracking, and it's very difficult to know, you know, if I see brand on the screen, whether I go to my friends and I then tell them that this brand's amazing, you should go buy it. It's very, very difficult to track that. So I think it can be split down into who's, you know, taking pictures of your brand, how many times you're being mentioned, what are followers saying, you know, even putting your brand name into Twitter and seeing how many mentions there are. Also referral tracking, but also how many times your content's being shared, who's, you know, is your engagement on your posts going up. These are measurable KPIs that you can assess week on week whether your brand advocacy campaign's working. But I think realistically, you have to look at a brand advocacy campaign as a very grassroots way to grow, and it does take time, and it does mean that you will probably be spending a lot of time on it. But with the customer journey, it's a very cost-effective way of improving the experience that your consumer can have. And it's not just you know, just giving them stuff. It's talking to them in a personal way, and making sure that your brand message is coming across to them. So the actual KPIs that we set out is brand mentions, whether the website bounce rate's going down, brand interactions and engagement, the search volume of our own brand term. You know, if you're, for example, we're in the health and wellness industry, if we have, you know, search traffic turmeric going up into our website, that's not an advocate that's going to be driving that. But if we see traffic of the drug.store going up, then we can attribute some of that to advocacy. A decrease in customer acquisition, customer acquisition cost, I should say, sorry, That is probably the best measure for us. If you know it costs you £15 to acquire a customer as an average over a month or more or whatever, and that's steadily decreasing, you know that there is organic growth going on there that is decreasing the cost of customer acquisition cost. And then the last one and the most accurate one is referral tracking, but that obviously depends on the advocate signing up to your referral campaign, which they may or may not do. Some advocates we find don't, and they're more than happy just sharing your message on social media, sharing your content, engaging with it, but don't necessarily want financial reward for referring friends. And that's pretty much it. I thought I'd leave most of it. So if you guys wanted to ask any questions, I've sort of rifled through the slideshow just so that, obviously it's very dependent upon brand, the way you speak and how you're actually going to go about getting advocates on board. But yeah, I thought I'd leave a bit of time for a Q&A now.
That was really good. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, so if you have any questions, please put them into the chat section. That would be really good. And then also be interesting to see what you would consider yourself an advocate of, which brands, just that maybe we can discuss those. It'd be really interesting to see what everyone has an affiliation with. And also maybe anyone that you feel as though have done it pretty bad as well, so we can discuss that. But one thing which I wanted to ask just before the questions start filtering through is, in terms of the drugstore, obviously you mentioned it's 1.5 years old. So is the purpose still developing as it continues to grow, or have you pretty much got that nailed on at the moment?
No, I think unless you're a very, very well-established company, it's a constant evolution. Our purpose at the start is very, very different to what it is now, and now we are trying to make it as flexible as possible. To get people to understand. For example, ours is simply about giving people a way to improve their life or well-being, right? Whether that's going to be, we could pivot and start selling clothes if we wanted to. Not likely. Yeah. I hate the returns rate on clothes, so I would but it leaves you sort of room to grow into whatever area you want, but the customer understands that you are a place of improvement or a place to grow or a place to be mindful, and our content reflect that. So we've left ours, with a bit of room for evolution, because we know as a smaller company that we're going to have to grow into an area. But where that area is, you can't always say. So, I mean, more developed companies will have tighter purposes. But, the one that I love is Upcircle Beauty, who have nailed their proposition. They're quite a young brand, and everyone associated with that brand is pushing their messaging of sustainability, which is really clear, really obvious. And I think that their customer group really understands that as well.
I think I mentioned before we did the webinar that I'm eating far more grenade bars at the moment. And I mean, even before COVID, I was more driven by the product as opposed to the company messaging. So I love grenade bars, love the taste of them. But I feel as though the CEO, the founder of the company, for me, has become a little bit more louder over the past few weeks. And I feel as though I'm more of a brand advocate based on what they're doing and what their company message is doing at the moment. Do you feel, I mean, are there any other brands that you know of? I know you mentioned Huel, which actually I think they closely link with Grenade, don't they? And I think both owners regularly speak to each other. But are there any other brands that you know of that are really kind of pushing themselves through this COVID experience to get that messaging out and the purpose?
Yeah, I mean, with COVID, I think brands that are doing the best are the ones that are sort of most transparent. I know there's a brand in the US called Supply, which do razors, and they've made it so that you can get free, if you subscribe, which is $10 a year or something, you get free razor blades for life, which is unbelievably cheap. But it was in response to people being at home more. I don't know
Yeah.
whether it's going to be a profitable model for them, but the idea is that they're going to be cross-selling and upselling. I think so. I've seen down here that someone's mentioned BA.
Yeah.
But some airlines have had big wins off it, and some haven't. And I think it's about being transparent with COVID, especially how it's affecting your operations, what to expect, and being clear with the customer of how it's going to affect you going forward. Transparency, I think, is what most customers crave at the moment.
Yeah.
And some sort of stability and assurances, because there is none at the moment. So if you can provide even a little insight into your decision making as a company, then that will go a long way with the consumer.
So Emma has said, what type of content is the most shareable in your experience?
Oh, depends on the brand. As much as I hate to say it, meme content goes down very well on things like Instagram.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, does it have a lot of your brand messaging behind? It can contain a bit, and people get a feel for your brand. It will get you followers, but it's quite hard to convert followers into brand advocates. But I think the most effective content, I should say, is blog content for us. If we can get good blog content across, and something that the consumer actually genuinely wants to read, rather than just SEO-based blog content, which is what we used to do when we were growing. I think now we're seeing a lot more shares of those emails, and actually, the clicks to the blogs and we can measure this, the clicks to the blog on the day that we send that blog out far exceeds the click-through of the email. So we know it's being shared. It's quite difficult to know how it's being shared. And I think most ecom people can feel my pain with that one. But definitely the most effective content for us is blog content.
And then the next one is from Ruben. Do you use PPC to bring in new customers?
Yeah. I mean, we do. And with that, obviously, it's not necessarily going to be the brand advocate customer straight away. It's not someone it's a very different journey if you come from social media to brand. Like, you get the brand straight away and you get what they stand for because you've been following them for some time. PPC, they could be searching, in our case, for turmeric, and we have turmeric product, and they click through and they buy it. So that's why the customer experience and the customer journey post-purchase is really, really important. And then, if people do have issues, actually, maybe I went over it, but I think I did go over it. But some of the aftercare that we've had, 5-star reviews from people saying, I'll share my screen again. So you can see here, like, these are people that have had issues with their orders, and providing that aftercare and turning them into 5-star reviews and 5-star, and advocates going forward. That post-purchase experience is really where you can turn a PPC customer into a brand advocate. It's a lot harder though, but yeah, we do use PPC.
So Sarah, she's talking about how she had to change her wedding to next year, super organised and booked the BA flights earlier this year. And BA are now saying that we fall outside of the months where we can change our flights, meaning a loss of money, no preempting of offering a voucher as this falls out of their time frame. As you can probably guess, it's completely changed the viewpoint on BA and have lost complete trust and faith in them as a brand. How can businesses make clever decisions in being flexible during this time to maintain loyalty and also ensure they make the best business decisions for the cash flow and longevity? And also, how would you go about converting a lost customer and bringing them back to the brand? Do you feel it can be too late?
Yeah, so I'll try and go through that one. Yeah, BA, I imagine that was a cost-based decision that they were basing it on. For me, if it wasn't a cost-based decision, it makes no sense, because you know, that is quite clearly going to lose customer. So I'm assuming it's cash flow on their side. You know, I think if you can be flexible in this time in terms of you know, free product or delaying it or vouchers, I think that would be the best way to deal with it. Obviously, not every business is going to be gifted with that, especially the bigger ones. I think the bigger they are, almost the less flexible they can be, especially when BA don't have a product to give in replacement. No, they can't. Their product is flights.
Yeah.
They're going to really struggle with that proposition, which unfortunately I think so many airlines are going to struggle with, right? Do I think you can win someone back after you've sort of annoyed them like this?
Yeah.
It's very, very hard. You can win them back, but it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of groveling, and probably a lot of cost. And then it comes down to a cost decision, whether it's worth acquiring versus acquiring new customer to winning back old ones. If you lose a customer like this, it's not going to be a cost base. It's not going to be a cost decision for the customer. You know, if I email lost customers and say, you know, you can have 50% off.
Yeah.
That's not the point. It's about repatching your relationship, acknowledging that you did something wrong or acknowledging that you could have been better, introducing them into a feedback loop. You know, we understand that we annoyed you. What feedback can you give us so that we can improve your experience, so that we can improve ourselves going forward? That's probably, in my experience, been the best way of healing sort of patchy relationships. But in this instance, I can completely understand why Sarah probably wouldn't be going back with BA anytime soon. That's a really tricky one, because I mean, they're not going to have a product that's going to be easy to, you know, replace. What they should be doing is going back to Sarah at some point when their cash flow allows it, or whenever, acknowledging what they did wrong and replacing or sort of reissuing the funds of her lost wedding day flights. But yeah, that's a tricky situation, that.
So I know you mentioned, especially with a lot of food businesses and nutrition businesses, they're seeing significant increases online in terms of sales. So with the same process of marketing to brand advocates and doing the same thing that you have been doing for the past few months, is it the same with the increase of customer flow, or do you have to tweak things?
Yeah, it is the same, but we've had to segment a little bit more in our email list. I think some people would be falling into brand advocacy type roles a little bit too early.
Yeah.
And we're spending a lot more time educating people on why. We're getting a lot more new customers, whereas at the start we were getting loads of return customers, and that was, you know, we were getting new customers, but majority returning. And at that point, they know what your story is. Whereas what we're doing now is reiterating our story a lot to those segments.
Yeah.
And getting them to buy into the brand, not just that they want to buy, you know, CBD or magnesium or turmeric or whatever. And making it a brand purpose-led story, not a need purpose-led story. Like, you needed turmeric, so you bought it from us. It's more, the drugstore stands for this.
Yeah.
These are the products that might suit you because you bought turmeric, and try and personalize that a little bit more. So we've had to get a little bit clever, and we're still adapting with that. But yeah, as customers, as there's an increase in customer purchases, then you do have to rethink it a little bit, and rejig it, because the amount of people coming in that don't know your brand story is increasing.
Yeah. So we've got some other comments here. So Jackie said it can be tough to communicate brand importance and value of brand measures with CFOs and some CEOs. Top tips for stakeholder engagement.
Nightmare, absolute nightmare. I mean, for me, I think the best way to communicate it is to look at what competition's doing, to look what value has been driven to those brands through, you know, great reviews or great engagement rate, and simply being like, you know, sometimes you might have a competitor or a parallel brand in a different vertical that you go, would you like to be more like this? And the answer is always yes, because, you know, if they look like they're playing a part, most people will be like, yeah, actually that'd be quite nice to that sort of engagement. It's just the time and effort. Is it worth it? It's going to be the main constraint on the CEO or CFO's head. Luckily, I don't think brand advocacy is really that expensive to develop. I mean, you can do some really smart things at quite a low cost. And I think what you can do is show the uplifts that you're seeing on these brand advocacy campaigns, whether it's through your post-purchase flow or whether it's your Instagram, and showing that it is worth the time and effort. And then hopefully they chuck a few more resources at it. But like you said, like, I mean, it's a very tough thing to measure, and sometimes those conversations with CFOs and CEOs can be a bit tricky, because it's not like, you know, PPC, you put £1 in, you get £2 out. You know, that's a very easy conversation to have with a CFO. But if you align yourself with other brands in different verticals and see how they're doing it, people buy brands, and without that, you know, you might have a great PPC funnel, but you're not going to have any actual tangible worth. You know, if you're looking at an exit strategy or something like that, and you don't have a brand and a reason why people are purchasing with you, then what you're doing is easily replicated by someone else. You know, it might take a long time to be replicated, so you need to develop that brand and those advocates to get them sending back to your site.
John said, have you in-house your digital marketing and creative at the drugstore?
It's sort of 50-50, because basically, I mean, actually all the creative is in-house. But the digital marketing, some of it is with agency. Just at the rate at which we've grown, we didn't want to bring on more staff, especially because a lot of the growth has come this year as well. We didn't want to bring on more staff in case that growth goes away. Obviously, when you're a smaller company, it can it's not a linear function, your growth is like a step function. So if we don't see any growth past that, we didn't want to bring staff on, be responsible for them, and actually have to look after them. I don't want to bring a staff on and then have to hire them 6 months later because we don't need that function working. So what we're doing, we're bringing agency in to prove concept, and then we'll be bringing in in-house marketing. The end goal for us will be having a fully in-house marketing team.
And Emma has said, what do you think the future of paid advocates will be, i.e. influencers? Do you see their credit is decreasing or increasing for brand partnerships?
Oh, tough one. I think certain influencers have managed their growth very well. I mentioned a few earlier, you know, they only post what they believe in. They don't just simply take a post and put, you know, product next to their face. And I think when you're looking at influencers, you've got to look at why someone follows them. Like, look at their timeline. It becomes very apparent whether they have a message. You know, align your message with influencers that have a message. There's a lot of influencers that don't have messages. And if they don't, then the likelihood of their followers actually caring what they say is very, very low. We've seen some very poor returns of some big influencers. So I think the ones that manage it badly, for sure, their credit is decreasing. For the ones that have managed it well, Grace Beverley, Alice Living, for example, I think people do still care about their messaging, and I think their importance is actually increasing into, you know, they're getting closer with magazines, for example. I know Alice has a big affiliation with things like Women's Health, and I think they're becoming, or their following really trust their word, but I think that's the exception rather than rule on a broad sense of influencers. Having said that, you can get awareness about your brand out with influencers simply by people just clicking on their story, but whether it's a worthwhile interaction is very hard to say. I personally don't think so. We don't chuck too much money at influencers or brand partnerships on that front, just because we do think it is decreasing.
I don't think there's any other questions, but is there anything that you'd want to leave everyone with, Charles, just in terms of your thoughts on the presentation or some of the things that people have mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, advocacy doesn't need to be an expensive channel to spend some time on. It is just a time-intensive thing. It's showing there. It's being transparent. It's being responsive on customer service. It's making sure that if you're on the other end of receiving your product, receiving an email, looking at your social media, is it something you enjoy receiving, looking at, sharing, or not? And taking a step away and just looking, okay, if I received a box from the drugstore, would I be happy with the way it's presented? Would I then go, this is above the typical package experience or the typical customer service email I get? You don't need to do too much to get into the top 10% of experiences. I think there's so many out-the-box experiences that people use, like Shopify will have standard order confirmation flows and stuff. Just use the same flow, just use some language that resonates with your consumer group and that they care about, and you'll start seeing some pretty good results straight away. And I think in terms of my experience, I think the biggest one's customer service. Produce a great customer service. The cost per acquisition costs for a returning customer versus a new customer, very, very different. If it costs you a £5 voucher to turn a bad experience into a good experience, give it. Because it will cost you a lot more to get a new customer to replace that lost one. But customer experience is really the heart of what we believe is the driving factor behind our advocacy campaign. I was previously at Amazon, and it's a core pillar there, customer obsession. And I think just think about how you would receive it as a customer. If you were using an example from Sarah earlier, if you were BA, how would you do it? Just look at it and say, what is my experience, and would I be happy with the way I'm solving these problems? And transparency as well. Just be transparent with the customer. I think that's going to be a growing trend of in the next few years, is people actually just being honest. I think it just goes a long way. Be honest and have great customer service.
Do you think some brands haven't been as transparent as they should have, and it's taken COVID for them to be like that? Or what do you think? Yeah,
I think I think there's a growth of transparency in brands, and using that as a marketing technique as well. But I think COVID has made that uptake a lot quicker. I think there's a lot more brands being transparent about their issues, about out of stock things. Oh, sorry, you ordered, but we're actually out of stock. It was our back-end system mistake, blah, blah. We'll make up to you, expect your delivery here. But then I do find that sometimes, like in Amazon's case, they use messaging where they've tried to be transparent, and it's sort of backfired a little bit, because they said your order will be 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And then if you do order, you get it in 3 days. But it's actually stopping people from ordering. And I think we're seeing a big shift. Big retail like Amazon, eBay to D2C models, and more people shopping with D2C because they want that closer experience to the end product.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Charles. Much appreciated. And guys, thanks a lot for coming. If there are any further questions, please feel free to catch up with Charles on LinkedIn. Easily findable. But yeah, any questions that you want me to feel through to Charles, I'm happy to do that as well. You should all have my email address. But yeah, thanks for coming, guys, and have a great week.
Yeah,
thanks, Charles.
Cheers, guys.